This comes, though, this Florida poll comes as Marco Rubio's personal finances are under a new scrutiny. The Tampa Bay Times reporting that Rubio still hasn't turned over some records related to a state party credit card while Speaker of the Florida State House. Earlier statements show he charged personal expenses like repairs to the family minivan and a $10,000 family reunion to the card. Rubio has defended the charges and said he reimbursed the party for them. His campaign tells the Times that more records will be released soon, possibly within the month. So, John, is this like much ado about nothing because it was small potatoes compared to some of the other candidates and the numbers that they deal with, or is there an ethical issue with these cases?
Well, I think that there has been a widespread presumption among a lot of elites in the Republican Party that Marco Rubio's, that this issue in particular, and more broadly speaking, Rubio's past in Florida politics and as connected to his finances is the great vulnerability that he has. There's a lot of campaigns who have been looking at it pretty carefully, a lot of campaigns who got a little scared away when the New York Times sort of took a shot in this direction, and there were flaws with that story that kind of made it a
So what is the real story here?
Well, the real story is, actually, Nick, the real story is that the speaker that followed him got sent to jail for misusing these funds.
Right.
And there was a culture down there that the speaker inherited, and there's been an assumption by Tallahassee people and other people around there that they need to get to the bottom of this. I mean, this is a big deal.
Look, the state GOP in Florida, is not always a great ethical example, right? So there's always been problems there. But the question is really, now that he's a front runner or the front running establishment candidate, right? Do we now get real tough scrutiny of some of these issues financially from his past? It's been circling around in Florida forever, right? It's always been talked about there. The credit card issue, again, small sums, right?
I mean,
but on the other hand, it's weird and sloppy. It's like I use the wrong credit card over and over and over again. So at some point, I think it'll be an issue for him.
Bob McDonald went to jail for small sums. When you're talking about the misuse of campaign finances, the misuse of state party finances, small sums actually become crimes. We're not saying that about Marco. I'm saying, though, his successor got sent to jail. A guy I knew very well got sent to jail, was known as Mr. Clean, but he misused the credit card from the state Republican Party and misused it on family things and got sent to jail for it.
When that New York Times piece came out that John was just talking about, the reaction to it was so strong in Rubio's favor that I think it actually helped him in the party. Remember the thing about the boat?
Stupid.
He repaired his driveway, he got a book deal, so he bought a boat. So I wonder how this is different. I mean, if you like Marco Rubio, if you're inspired by his optimism, his youth, his message, all that, are you really going to care that he spent $10 on a movie ticket?
You have to show that he misused money from one account to another.
So the question, John or Nick,
that's the key there.
You guys are reporting, did he do that? Did he misuse money?
We don't know yet.
So it's still a question.
He's admitted using the wrong credit card for personal payments, right?
I'm sorry, what?
He's admitted using the state party credit card for some personal expenditures and then reimbursing it, kind of after the fact. So he's admitted that. The question is if there are more payments we don't know about coming out, perhaps bigger ones.
And that's what this newspaper article is saying, is the Tampa Bay Times is
some of the information is not, again, as the story indicates, some of the information is not yet public. So there's a lot of, I think there was going to be a lot of digging on this front, both going on by rival campaigns that have been doing it for a while and by journalistic institutions down in Florida who know this story a lot better than we do. It is interesting that Donald Trump, who, whatever you think about him, has had an unerring instinct for when his rivals, when he sees a threat, for figuring out what the vulnerability of that rival is and is homing in on it. We saw him do it with Jeb Bush notably, but with others he's done it as well. That this is where he's gone immediately on Rubio.
It is beyond
this is his first thing. First, he's inexperienced, he sweats too much, and also let's now talk about his credit cards and his finances.
So
that's what Trump is going for, and it's right out of the gate because he sees right now Rubio and not Ben Carson, Rubio, and now that he believes Jeb Bush is basically dead, he looks at Rubio and says, that's the next guy who's a problem for me.
The thing is, though, Mika, the fact that everybody is turning their attention to Marco Rubio means Marco Rubio has become a threat.
Yes.
I mean, you look at, let's go to some of the New Hampshire polls.
All right, so Donald Trump, by the way, headed to New Hampshire today, where he's expected to personally deliver his filing papers for the New Hampshire primary. This is a new post-debate poll in that state, out just this morning. It shows his lead slipping to 2 points, with Ben Carson 18% to 16%. Marco Rubio has jumped 9 points since September to 11%. John Kasich in third place and 10 there, and Governor Chris Christie moving up to 6 points to fifth place at 8%. Rubio's and Christie's rise appear to be fueled by the debate performances. 27% thought Rubio did best, while 13% thought Christie did.
And Jeb Bush, obviously, by far, the choice for the worst performance last week, and Rand Paul just not even registering, really. Hey, let's go back to that poll, Mika. And there are two people to look at here. One is, of course, Marco Rubio. Can we slide back to yeah. One is Marco Rubio, of course, who got a big jump out of all of his debate performances, and of course is why everybody's focusing on him now. But Chris Christie up 6 percentage points at 8%. Another good debate by Chris Christie puts him in the middle of the fight, and Chris Christie is back and suddenly becomes the guy that the Republican establishment has been looking for as a counter to Donald Trump.
Yep, Trump is finally prepared to take his message to voters in a more traditional fashion, by the way. Take a look.
Look, anybody that hits me, we're going to hit them 10 times harder. So if, as an example, Bush or Rubio or any of them come out, we're going to just dollar for dollar, we're going to go after them. We have more money than anybody else by a factor of about 1,000. Actually, we're going to start some ads, I think, over the next 2 days. And certainly in Iowa, we're going to start ads, and in New Hampshire, and I think in South Carolina, too. So we're going to start advertising a little bit, because so far I was going to have spent $25 million by this time. I've spent nothing. I feel guilty because I've spent nothing because we haven't needed it.
People love that message. We're going to get a first look at these ads tomorrow morning. Donald Trump will join us tomorrow as we'll discuss the ads and the campaign. And John was just telling us, or Willie, about Chris Christie having something really...
Yeah. I mean, so Christie, it looks like Christie and Rubio are moving. The establishment has been wanting to find somebody to move. Christie and Rubio, at least in this New Hampshire polls, moving. We've got another New Hampshire poll that shows Donald Trump up as well. But the establishment looks like it might be coalescing around a couple of candidates.
Yeah, Rubio and Christie up big. We'll remind people, though, these debate performances can be sugar highs, which we saw with Carly Fiorina. She went way up and came back down. So we'll keep an eye on that. Chris Christie, though, this is what he said all along. He's never lost his optimism every time we've seen him come in here, despite the fact he's at 1%, 2%, 3%. He said, I'm just going to keep my head down and keep doing my thing. I'm going to go up to town halls. I'm going to go to New Hampshire. I'm going to go to Iowa. And I'm going to be Chris Christie. And he believes over the long haul, some people will fall away. He may not be the one who's getting the most attention on any given day, but he feels like if he does well in the debates and he keeps getting his message out in these states, he will creep up and be there in the end.
Can I ask one thing? So everybody said that Marco and Ted Cruz won the debates. Where's Ted Cruz's jump? Where's Ted Cruz's bounce? I haven't seen that as much in the polls as I've seen Marco's bounce.
That's a good question. I mean, he, has always had this ability to speak to his audience in these debates, right? He's also doing his thing. He's in it for the long haul. He's got plenty of money, Ted Cruz, and he's always talking to these three groups: the Tea Party people, the evangelicals, and the Rand Paul acolytes who he wants to sweep over. So it's almost like a long-term thing for him. He isn't looking for the big bugs, I don't think.
I don't think we've seen a post-debate Iowa poll. We've seen so many polls, so much polling.
I think there was one out yesterday that had Trump actually ahead of Carson by 1, and I think Cruz did pretty well there.
Yeah, look, if you're going to see Cruz, moving. You're not going to see Cruz moving you're more likely to see him moving in Iowa than you're going to see him moving in New Hampshire. Just given the
one other thing for people at home, where Mark Halperin and I have been talking about for some time, that Marco may not be built to last. Marco may not be built to last because on the ground in Iowa, on the ground in New Hampshire, he just doesn't have a lot of on-the-ground operations. Ted Cruz, on the other hand, built to last because, regardless of what the numbers look like now, because Ted Cruz is organized all over the place.
Yeah, but I'll say, though, about Rubio, I think, and Mark, and we've been talking about this for a long time. What's the state that Marco Rubio can win? I think what you're starting to see now is that there's an answer to that question, which is that if there's a place for Rubio, it's not Iowa, where organization matters so much. It's probably not South Carolina, but New Hampshire, actually, where he's getting this traction, where it is not an organization state. It's a primary state, not a caucus state. I think, if you were looking at the the early states, that's going to be the target of opportunity for Rubio, and you're starting to see that in the polls. It's the place where, if he were going to win one of the first four, which he, obviously everybody thinks you kind of need to do, that may be the place where he could catch on. And you hear that from New Hampshireites, that there's been interest in Rubio among elites in New Hampshire for the last 6 or 9 months, kind of waiting to see whether he might actually ever show any traction, and that he might now start to get that.
Interesting.
The Koch brothers are just joined at the hip with the Republican Party. To be a Republican is to be aligned with the Koch brothers.
That is not, yeah.
Right,
not
and then
even close.
when you think back and you realize David Koch, for instance, basically ran against Ronald Reagan. He was the Libertarian candidate for vice president back in 1980. And when I was listening to Charles Koch, I thought the most interesting part of your interview was listening to Charles Koch talk about George W. Bush and the Bush years. And what I heard in what he was saying was a lament I hear from so many conservatives, the idea that in the Bush era, about a decade ago, the Republican Party lost its way. And, he gave the benefit of the doubt to the so-called Republican establishment, believed they would act on his issues, emerged from the Bush years saying, government didn't get smaller, the corporate welfare didn't change at all, and in fact, George W. Bush was so unpopular at the end of that term, he'd given conservatism such a bad name that it allowed for the rise of Barack Obama and the expansion of government we've seen over the last few years. And so there's this lack of trust that I'm hearing in him, and I'm hearing from so many conservatives, and just the idea of just go along, elect Republicans, they'll follow with your agenda. He's not buying that. Well, that's what I could see. He's
not buying it, and Willie, it's like Sam Stein said yesterday, too. I mean, he's hearing a lot of things in these early primaries that they don't care about. They don't think the government should stop gay marriage. Right. They're pro-choice. They were anti-Bush on the big spending. They are anti-war. Anybody that says they want to send troops to Syria, you've just scared the hell out of the Kochs, because they think everybody but Rand Paul is a neocon. Now, that doesn't mean they're going to support Rand Paul. But, yeah, I mean, it is, again, I think it's a challenge for Republican candidates that want their support, especially in 16. They're not just blindly giving to Republicans in 16 unless they think they're going to vote against corporate welfare and that they're not going to be neocons.
And in the midterms a couple of years ago, and even well before that, Democrats did such a good job of pounding home the message that the Koch brothers equal Republicans and that they're dictating Republican policy. We know now that's not true based on your interview and other things we've heard. And it didn't work, by the way. I think voters didn't go into the booth and say, wait, those evil Koch brothers. And that's probably the reason you don't hear Republicans using Tom Steyer and George Soros the way Democrats use Koch, because they know voters don't make that link.
And especially now, what have we heard the most about the Koch brothers over the past year? Criminal justice reform. They're working with ACLU. We were going to interview Charles Koch, and we get an email from Valerie Jarrett, who says, say hi.
Well, it wasn't like that.
Well, no, but it was like Mark said we disagree on a lot of things.
We're doing great work.
Mark Holden and the Kochs have been a real help in pushing through criminal justice reform. So it's very interesting. And again, I think the great challenge is to Republican candidates. No, listen.
We're telling the story.
This is not a commercial. I am saying this is a warning to Republican candidates. If you think you're going to be able to back up your truck in 2016 to these people's bank to get money, think again. I don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
But I do think it's going to be more of a challenge. We'll see. We'll see.
Okay.